Have you ever felt that something was wrong but couldn't figure out what it was? The worst thing is that you can't get rid of that feeling. It stays with you, haunts you at night when you lie in bed and can't sleep. I hadn't reached this stage of dreaming yet, but I knew that if I didn't find an answer soon, I would. I had been feeling this way for several months. I don't know why, because everything in our life was fine. My wife Margaret and I had very successful and fulfilling careers, and yet we found a way to put our family's needs first. Our children were growing into good, respectable teenagers, each in their own way. Those difficult teenage years, by the grace of God, had passed smoothly so far. I was very proud of how they had all turned out. The Pig and Whistle restaurant and bar we owned was doing very well. The locals loved the restaurant for its smoked pork and barbecue ribs with side dishes. Most of the profits went into a fund for our children's further education after they finished school. My wife and I argued about this because she wanted a bigger house. For me, the top priority was to give our kids the best opportunities in life. I thought, why do we need a big house if in 5 to 8 years it will just be the two of us because the kids will gradually move out? She was against the idea of opening a bar and restaurant from the start, but I used the teaching of headship from the Bible to support her. It was difficult for me to make this decision because I knew Margaret was strongly opposed to it. She fought me tooth and nail. Those were difficult months for both of us because we almost broke up. Margaret didn't like that I had the final say. After all, she was a woman and most women see things differently. But in most cases, she got her way anyway. Most married men, if you ask them, will admit that their wives rule the roost. Our church pastor was the one who finally got us to talk about everything. Margaret was worried that I was jeopardizing everything we had built together. She felt that I was undermining her sense of security. To be honest, I didn't think so. In a way, I had to admit she was right because if things fell apart, we would be left with nothing. The pastor made it clear that we as a couple didn't understand each other's emotional needs and had deliberately stopped communicating. Neither of us was honest enough with the other to share our fears or hopes. We were both to blame. Apart from the general manager and the head chef, most of my employees were members of the church. It was their support that made the restaurant and bar so successful. The restaurant part of the building closed at 6 p.m. 6 days a week. From the very beginning, I refused to open on Sundays, and that has remained the case to this day. At first, I didn't realize how much this set our business apart from others in the market. From the moment we opened, we became a constant topic of conversation. I was successful because on Sundays, most restaurants and bars were empty for 3/4 of the day. I couldn't imagine myself on a Sunday forcing others to work. By state law, the bar was open from noon to 1 a.m. From Thursday to Saturday evenings, we had live music, always country and western. On Mondays and Wednesdays, we reserved a space for open mic night. Thanks to the locals, the place became a refuge for them. Anyone who could play an instrument was welcome here. This turned out to be a wise decision on our part. For many, it became a social event that was talked about for weeks. At least 3 times a month, songwriters would gather here to play their latest compositions and get feedback. Tuesday became a cultural evening, and we got to know music from different cultures around the world. Thanks to the university, our small multicultural communities introduced us to their vision of what we call classical or folk music once a month, and tickets for these evenings were always sold out weeks in advance. As a result, we had many international students because it helped them feel closer to home. When their relatives came to visit, they always came to this evening. Many parents told us that it helped their children adapt. My wife and I started attending this evening regularly because it constantly introduced us to different cultural traditions. Many of our longtime friends came from these evenings. Over the years, I have gained enough knowledge to say hello, welcome, you look good today, and goodbye in 6 languages. An added bonus was that it brought me many new clients in my main job. From that point on, we worked hard on 2 aspects of our lives that our pastor said needed attention, and it brought us closer together than ever before. 5 years later, we both agreed that it was the best decision we had ever made as a husband and wife. Of course, over time, she took all the credit. Now everyone thought she was the one who made me do it. At church and with our pastor, we were considered a model couple that everyone looked to as an example of what a family should be. Our children had no tattoos, piercings, or wild hairstyles. When they came to Sunday service, they were dressed tastefully. All 3 of them insisted that I let them do it. We discussed it as a family because my eldest wanted to get a tattoo. I suggested that they all get henna tattoos. I had no idea that it would be such a difficult experience for our children. When the tattoos faded after 8 weeks, they didn't ask to do them again. There's nothing like learning from experience that doing something to your body won't get you what you want. This bothered me a lot because I couldn't understand why I felt this way in my relationship with my loving and supportive wife. The only thing that stood out was that my wife and I had grown emotionally distant, and I couldn't understand why. As far as I could tell, there was no reason for the problems. I even doubled my efforts to put her needs first, but that didn't help either. It got to the point where I was on the verge of a breakdown. Over the past 3 years, I've noticed that the situation has been getting worse. We've been married for 18 years, and everything has been going very well. We paid off our mortgage in 10 years and had virtually no debt. We had 3 healthy children. Jean, our eldest, 16, was a walking miniature copy of her mother. Agnes, our second child, stole my heart at 15, took after her mother and sang in the church choir. Wade, our only son, who was 14, was going to be one of the biggest, fattest linebackers you'd ever see when he grew up. Spanking him from the age of 10 was more painful for my hand than it was for him. All 3 were born within a year and a half of each other. Because of his size at birth, Wade caused my wife serious internal injuries, leaving her unable to have more children. He weighed 10 pounds, 8 ounces at birth and hasn't lost a pound since. It took her a long time to recover emotionally. I was so concerned that I suggested she consider adoption, but she quickly rejected the idea. As soon as our youngest daughter started school, she got a job, which she still has today. During that time, she has had 3 different bosses. My name is Raymond Burns, and I am not related to the Scottish poet, although it was my poetry that helped me win my wife's heart. I am an agent for State Farm Insurance, and I have my own office with 3 employees, so I make a very good living. Margaret works for the chief of police in Cape and was his executive assistant. Family was very important to us, but as in any family, when children become teenagers, they develop their own interests, thoughts, and personalities. Each of them demanded more time for friends and socializing than for us. It's hard for any parent to realize that their children no longer need them emotionally as much as they did when they were little. Nevertheless, Margaret and I are adapting to the changes that come with our children growing up. Although we have tried to be Christians all our lives and have actively practiced our faith, we have not imposed our views on others because we believe that our lives speak for themselves. That Friday, Marge called toward the end of the workday to say they had something important to do. They had another meeting with Jackson City officials about expanding the county jail and building a new courthouse. Peter Reynolds, her boss, and my wife were supposed to be at the meeting. This didn't surprise me because it happened quite often. They had been working on this project for the past 3 years, and now it was almost complete. There were so many last-minute meetings like this that it had become the norm. Since all 3 teenagers had plans for the evening, I had nothing to do. I changed my usual plans because of spring break. After changing into my work clothes, I decided to stop by a restaurant for a bite to eat. Peter, my wife, and I knew each other, of course, but that was many years ago when we all attended the same high school. We hadn't seen each other in years until he moved away 4 years ago. Marge and I grew up together, living less than 2 blocks apart. Our fathers worked at the same factory, manufacturing washing machines and dryers for retail stores. She became interested in boys before I did in girls. We hung out with different people in high school. We each had our own goals in life. I didn't have time for girls. While most guys were chasing them, I spent my free time earning money for a car I was building to race with my friends once a month. I have to admit that it consumed me. My paternal grandfather passed on his love of cars and speed to me. When I was growing up, my parents let me spend as much time with him as possible. At first, I just handed him the tools he needed and asked him what they were for. By the time I was 10, I was working alongside him as he built and repaired race cars. 4 months before my senior prom, Margaret's boyfriend was killed in a racing accident. I wasn't there that night because I was working at Taco Bell. My father told me that her father was furious that she had been there that night because she could have been in his car. I realized that it had scared him to death. Margaret and I were acquaintances at the time, but her crowd and their values didn't match ours. Her friends competed for glamour, reputation, and attention. We, on the other hand, wanted to win at top speed. As a result, I put my last hot rod with a 450 horsepower four-cylinder engine up for sale and sold it in a week. My father was shocked when he came home from work and found that I had bought a dismantled frame of an old 1940 Ford pickup truck for $200 to restore it. I had to drag it out of a local farmer's unused field. To be honest, it wasn't in the best condition. It was covered in dirt and standing on four wooden planks. As soon as he saw it for the first time, he said, "What farmer decided you were a sucker and sold you this piece of junk?" In my spare time, I repaired it piece by piece, cutting out the rust, replacing the fenders, using glue and sheet metal where necessary. Then, I had to sand everything down to a smooth finish. The hardest part was finding parts for the chassis. If I couldn't do something right, my grandfather would come and give me advice. Like me, he saw its potential. In his growing enthusiasm, he made some of the basic parts I needed for the chassis. He got so carried away that he came over and took pictures of its gradual transformation. The next weekend I had off, I painted it with primer and undercoat. The following weekend, I painted it twice. Every piece of metal that wasn't chrome was now jet black inside and out. My grandfather thought the color was perfect. My father looked at it and wondered if it was worth the time and effort. Over the Labor Day weekend, with the help of a few friends and my mom's excellent cooking, we were able to install the new engine, connect the transmission, and run all the wiring. A local upholstery shop reupholstered and repaired the seats, and the car was ready to roll. My grandfather, who inspected everything, said, "The little one is taking shape." By the end of September, I had finished the work. Everything that needed to be re-chromed had been done and fixed. A friend who worked in advertising repainted the Ford lettering on the back of the truck. We put on white tires, and on the last Saturday of the month, I passed the inspection, got my license, and bought insurance. The first people to see it on the road were my grandparents. I drove them around the village before I was allowed to drive home. I don't know who enjoyed the ride more, my grandmother or my grandfather. Until his death, he sometimes rode in it with his wife. We took the truck to rallies and car shows whenever we could. My grandfather loved to talk about what I had done under his guidance. Everyone was impressed when we were able to make a photo album with all the pictures from start to finish. I still remember the job offers I received thanks to my grandfather's proud boasts. I was driving home with my latest pride and joy, giving my grandparents their first ride, when I saw Margaret struggling with her bags. I stopped and offered her a ride home. She had been shopping in town and bought more than she intended. To my surprise, she accepted. On the way to her house, I learned that most of the people she associated with thought I was stupid. This didn't surprise me, as I kept to myself. I had few close friends. Car repair and restoration took up all my time and, as my father said, kept me out of trouble. She asked me why I had stopped racing. I told her honestly that her boyfriend's death had made me think about changing my life. I was old enough, and it was time to decide what to do with my life. I told her that I had sold my hot rod to pay for repairs on the truck I was now driving. She was surprised to learn that I had gotten more for it than it was worth. When we pulled up to her parents' house, I got out of the car to help her carry the shopping bags into the house. I found out that they were all the materials and accessories she needed to sew the dress she was going to wear to prom. After she found the perfect fabric, she decided she needed to go. She asked if I had a date, and I explained that I wasn't even planning on going. Her father was mowing the lawn. He stopped to look at my restored truck. When Margaret took the bags from me, I went out to talk to him. "Your father was surprised you gave up racing so suddenly," he said, "but he thought you were a fool for buying it. He didn't think it would be good for anything." "Damn, you proved him wrong. I think it's beautiful. How much did it cost you to restore it?" "About $10,000, not counting labor," I replied. "I sold my last hot rod for just over 14. I've already had 12 offers for this one. I tested it commercially to make sure I hadn't missed anything when I built it. As soon as it passed inspection, I insured it." "That was a wise decision on your part, young man," he said. He asked me to open the hood to look at the engine and was surprised that I hadn't modified it in any way. He had a lot of questions and I answered them all. He noted that modern cars don't have the same protection as this one. "Do you think you'll sell it in the future?" he asked. "No, because the longer I have it, the more it will be worth," I replied. "Cars of this generation are becoming increasingly rare. I want to drive it until I stop using it regularly." "Keep it, but my daughter Marge was watching us," he said, as we looked under the hood. I laughed and replied, "Don't worry, Judging by the people she's dated in the past, I'm definitely not her type. Maybe, but you're the first young man she's shown any interest in since Ralph died, he said. And maybe she's gotten over it and is ready to move on. Closing all the doors behind me, I opened the driver's door and was about to drive home when I heard Margaret say, Raymond, please don't go. I need to talk to you. I saw her coming down the stairs, and for the first time in my life, I saw her as a young woman, not just the neighbor's girl. Margaret was a natural beauty. She was about 5 feet 7 inches tall. Her figure was slim and well-proportioned. She looked healthy, which I liked very much. Her reddish-brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail. The fact that she wasn't wearing makeup like most of the girls in the crowd was a plus for me. On the other hand, at 5'10", I had a well-defined upper chest, but the lower part was skin and bones. My parents said I always had bumpy breasts, whatever that meant. That is, I was wide at the top but narrow at the bottom. My naturally curly brown hair, the longer it got, the more it resembled an afro hairstyle. Now I really needed a haircut. When I was growing up, my mom always said I looked bulky and big in the winter. In the summer, without a shirt, I looked like one of those starving children in Africa. At 18, when I took off my shirt, even if I sucked in my stomach, you could still see the outline of my rib cage. Margaret walked with a confidence that said she knew who she was and what she wanted. The white t-shirt she wore emphasized the softness of her figure, but did not reveal the shape or size of her breasts. 6 weeks until prom, she said. The first thing I need to know is, can you dance? Not very, I replied honestly. Maybe I can do the square dance where someone leads me, but that's about it. Why not? She asked. I've never found a man worth doing it for, I explained, not knowing what else to say. If I ever wanted to start dancing, it would only be to please a girl I'm dating. Then we'll have to practice a lot over the next 6 weeks, she said. Why do we need to? I asked. Because you're going to take me to prom, she laughed. Are you serious? I asked. She took my hand and said, yes, unless you turn out to be a klutz. Learning to dance was fun. When there was a party at the church before prom, I went to show off what I had learned. In the huge basement of the church, I danced so well that it caught my attention. 2 girls asked me if I had a date for prom, in front of the guys who were interested in them. Margaret couldn't go to the prom, but she definitely heard about it. Everyone asked who was teaching me, and I told them. The next week at school, many of the boys who had been watching me asked Margaret if she would give them lessons too. She replied, if Raymond says so, I will. One look at me and they decided they'd better take lessons elsewhere because I had been doing weight training for several years. The high school coach tried for years to get me on the soccer team, but it just wasn't my thing. I could play most sports, but they didn't interest me. At prom, I saw Margaret in a dress for the first time. It was such an unforgettable moment that I can still close my eyes and picture it. The light blue strapless dress hugged her figure, emphasizing the beauty of her body. The neckline was half hidden, but there was no doubt that it was very low. I still believe that it was at that moment that I realized I was in love with her. That was when I first wondered why she was with someone like me. There was something about her that I hadn't noticed before. Style and grace. That evening couldn't have gone better. Although we weren't the king and queen, we were treated like royalty. Everyone envied my old, restored 1940s Ford. If another girl asked me to dance, I made sure Margaret didn't mind. When a guy asked her, she did the same. One of the waitresses told us how nice it was to see such a young couple treat each other with such respect. The woman said, you have something special. Don't let the envy of others destroy it. At the end of the school year, we broke up because of something I saw by accident. Peter Reynolds, the school quarterback, was hugging her. I was with a group of friends when we caught them. I stood and watched them from across the soccer field as they shared a very intimate kiss. When one of the girls asked me what I was thinking about, I replied, there goes my ex, willingly moving from one man to another. I replied, there goes my ex-girlfriend, willingly moving from one man to another. That evening, I went to her parents' house and told Margaret in front of them who I had been with and what we had all seen. When I asked her how long our relationship had lasted, she didn't answer. I said, thanks for wasting my time, I won't bother you anymore. She cried and looked upset. But I didn't believe her because if she really felt that way, she wouldn't have flirted with him. Since then, if I saw her walking down the street toward me, I would cross to the other side to avoid meeting her. Her father later told my father that even they didn't know what she was doing behind my back. Dad told him that I didn't say much, but he knew I was suffering. I came home, changed into jeans, and went to our restaurant for a bite to eat. After that, I planned to sit in the bar for an hour or two. I was sitting there enjoying my food when Peter's wife, Tammy, walked into the restaurant. When I first noticed her, she struck me as a woman with a lot on her mind. That intrigued me because she headed straight for me. When she reached my table, I stood up. Tammy wasn't from around here. She had met Peter when he was in the police academy. Her parents belonged to an old family. I firmly believed that Peter had married her for that reason. He had left Margaret for her. Tammy was still a very beautiful woman with black hair, dark blue eyes, and a smile that could attract anyone's attention. She had a great figure that most men would want to hold every day. I always thought Peter had been cheating on her when she married him. Peter returned to town 4 years ago from the other side of the state when our old police chief retired. When he applied for the job, they liked that he was from around here. After the selection process and interviews, they reached an agreement that brought him back home. Tammy, it's been a long time, I said. You look great. How are the kids? The kids are growing up just like yours, Tammy replied. I came to talk about Peter and Margaret and what we're going to do. There's not much we can do, I said, until the construction is finished. Not with progressive Mayor Jackson trying to control everything that's done. He takes simple things, complicates them, and seems to succeed. All the while, he constantly ignores what's really important. Did Margaret tell you that? Tammy asked. Because if that's true, then Jackson Carter, sitting with his wife on the left, should have been at the meeting. I looked back and saw them. My face must have shown shock and surprise. Tammy was right. He was a member of Jackson's city council. I'm sorry, I thought you knew about Peter and Margaret's relationship, Tammy said. They've been together for about a year and a half. When you hear something like that from someone you barely know, you start to question and doubt their motives. As far as I could tell, Tammy had no motive. She was a registered nurse and worked at a nursing home from 3 to 11 at night. I was skeptical of what she was saying. I have a prenuptial agreement, she said. I'm worried that if I go any further, it will hurt you badly. I'm not the kind of person who takes a man's word for it when it comes to serious matters, I replied. I have to see for myself. I thought so, said Tammy, handing me a piece of paper. This is the address of the house where they currently reside. It belongs to a man who is serving his 7th prison sentence. Peter promised him a reduced sentence so he could use it. The fool doesn't know that Peter can't do anything. How did you get it? I asked. I took some time off work and rented a car to follow your wife, she replied. Peter used the same excuse on me last time. Then I went to the county archives to find out his name and checked all the records to find out as much as I could about him, using my husband's connections in the police. I'll go and check it out myself, I said. Let's exchange phone numbers and agree to text each other to see if it's safe to talk. If it turns out you're right, we'll have a lot to talk about. After saying goodbye, I paid the bill and headed for the exit. I got to my car and said, Google directions to 475 Old Cape Road, which was between Cape and Jackson. In the darkness of the night, it was a 10-minute drive. I pulled over to the side of the road. In the light of a street lamp in the parking lot, I could clearly see my wife's car and a police car parked nearby. All I could do was sit and wait for someone to get out of the car. While I waited, I spent 4 hours watching Hell's Kitchen on Pluto TV on my cell phone. Finally, the lovers got out of their cars. Before driving away, they kissed passionately. There was no doubt about it. My girl was in the arms of another man. She had willingly gone from one to the other. It was sad because I had been in the same situation with them before. Now I knew the real reason Peter Reynolds had returned, and it made me furious. Seeing them together, I realized I had been right. Peter had married Tammy for her family's money. I started the car in electric mode so as not to make a sound and drove away without turning on the headlights. By the light of the interior lights, I called Tammy on her cell phone. She answered right away. Give me a month, please, I begged, so I can put them both to sleep and they won't even know what happened to them. What are you going to do, Ray? Tammy asked. Put them in a hole so deep, I replied, that they won't be able to dig themselves out for years. Now I understood why we had grown apart emotionally. Her mind, heart, and eyes were preoccupied with something else. By the time I got home, I had already begun to devise a plan for revenge before striking the blow that would bring me victory. The woman I was married to had turned her back on her family and given her body, mind, and soul to another man. This was the second time I had seen my child willingly walk away from one person for another. As a result, neither of them would ever have a chance. I arrived home 10 minutes before my wife. Fortunately, all three of our children were spending the night at friends' houses. I quickly undressed, got under the covers, and turned on the cable news. I knew that while I was watching the news, Margaret would not go to bed until I fell asleep. Soon, she came into our bedroom and, as usual, headed for the shower. I slowly pretended to be asleep. Soon she joined me, smelling as fresh as she always did when she went to bed. She picked up the remote and turned on Rote Murder and fell asleep. 2 hours later, I went downstairs and found her work keys at the bottom of her bag. I spread some plasticine on a sheet of freezer paper and made impressions of the keys. By the time I returned to the basement to retrieve them, they had dried and hardened. Making copies was easy, and I knew who to turn to make sure everything went smoothly. The next step was to meet with the man from the prison to see if he could give me access to his home. This was the best thing I could do because he was as fed up with Peter Reynolds and his empty promises as I was. Fortunately, he had connections inside and outside that helped move my plan forward. It turned out to be the smartest move I ever made. I also sold him new home insurance. 4 weekends later, the smartest thing to do when you're in a situation where you know you're not going to win is to stay calm, relax, and do nothing. Pretend you don't care because that means you don't believe them. They'll soon realize that you don't give a damn about all the crap they're feeding you. This usually angers the other person. They lose their balance. They sweat, tense up, aware only of their own disappointment. They really dislike your impassive expression because it means you have no idea what they're talking about. That's what I've been doing for the last 4 hours. 2 detectives have been trying to question me about a man who, according to them, has been having an affair with my wife behind my back for months. By this point, I had decided that they had reached the point where they considered me a complete idiot. They had hinted so delicately that I should have known about their relationship, although by this point they may have started to think I was just stupid. When that didn't work, they tried to get aggressive. 2 detectives showed me photos of their secret love nest and explained that the meetings they had supposedly been going to for months were not real. They described in detail how they thought I had figured it out and why. As a result, they decided that I must be connected to their beloved police chief, Peter Reynolds. They even mentioned that he had successfully broken us up once before. I decided that Margaret must have told them all her dirty secrets. Now they had my attention because I couldn't wait to hear what these idiots would spew at me in an attempt to wear me down to the point where I would start to open up. I sat up straight, stopped slouching, and listened intently. I showed them facial expressions of surprise, admiration, sadness, and sometimes remorse. The days spent in hot spots had taken their toll on me. In those days, I learned to put on a poker face. When looking at my opponents, I always had to hide my thoughts and feelings. You never let the idiot you're competing against gain a physiological advantage. I liked how they acted. If only they knew that I thought they were getting more and more stupid and treated them accordingly. The only game left for them to play was good cop, bad cop against me. 2 days ago, my loving wife went to their special place and found that her lover was missing. She found a police uniform, a wallet, a gun, a holster, a watch, and a ring lying in a pool of dried blood. In a panic, she called the police, reported the possible crime scene, and left the house without touching anything so as not to destroy any evidence. She had no idea that she would have to explain why she was there. The insignificant situation she found herself in quickly turned into something very serious because of the identity of the man whose personal belongings were lying in a pool of dried blood. In addition, his police car was parked right next to her car. Because of this, she had to reveal her 19-month affair with her boss, a respected and influential police chief. When the detectives investigating the situation asked who could have known about their relationship, she replied that she had no idea. In desperation after being questioned again, she said, "The last person I would suspect is my husband Raymond, because he always works at our bar on Fridays and Saturdays." Only later did she realize that I had been working on a special project at the request of our pastor, so I hadn't been at the bar for several months. When I returned home that evening, she was in tears. I tried to explain to my wife what was troubling her and our children. She explained that what she was going through was simply an emotional experience that accompanies change. Investigators were puzzled by the fact that his gun hadn't even been fired. There were no signs of a struggle. All that was left were 2 wine glasses, a dozen red roses in a box, and 2 bottles of wine in the refrigerator. It seemed like it had been a romantic evening for the couple. It didn't take long for the police to figure out that I hadn't been where my wife thought I was on those 2 evenings, and hadn't been there for several weeks. The two detectives decided I had no alibi. For some reason, no one could find me. Based on what they knew, I automatically became the prime suspect. That Sunday, after the morning service, as we were finishing our conversation with the pastor, two detectives approached me to take me in for questioning. It was very awkward to be confronted by them in such a public place. I understood that they were in a state of panic. If Peter Reynolds was still alive, he definitely needed medical attention. His life could be in danger. Our three children were in a state of confusion. I could tell from Margaret's expression that she had not expected this turn of events. I pretended not to understand why they wanted to talk to me. I refused to go, said I was going home, and headed for my car. They arrested me for being an accessory to a possible murder. They put my hands behind my back, handcuffed me, and started leading me to their car. My three children started crying. Our parents stood there in shock. As they were taking me away, I turned to my wife and asked in a cold voice, "What are you accusing me of, Margaret?" Her face turned pale. Our parents and members of our church saw everything. I lied about what was happening right in front of her, knowing what rumors it would cause. As I was being put into the back seat of the police car, I turned around, looked at my wife, and smiled. I knew that in half an hour everyone would think that my wife was behind my arrest. My wife must have turned against me, but why? What did she say about me that could have led to this? On Friday evening, two of my Chinese brothers from our small organization, which was set up by a landowner, loaded him into an open box on an empty truck. Unfortunately, he didn't know that after work they had slipped a good dose of sleeping pills into his drinks, enough to knock him out for several hours, and then hooked him up to chloroform, which was supposed to keep him unconscious for the next few days. If they used the right doses, he should wake up in about half an hour. My job was to be the idiot the police would focus on. The longer I stayed with them, the better. So far, everything was going much better than planned. If the box was pushed, it would collapse and he would be free, naked. The only problem was that he could fall anywhere. We were kind enough to leave him a nice orange robe that fit him well. They're the kind worn by inmates in the county jail. It even had a prison tag on the pocket. It belonged to the Cape Girardeau County Jail. I decided that his loud cries would not attract enough attention for him to be discovered before the truck's next stop. By then, he would not be able to identify himself without any proof. If we did not give him enough food for his size and weight, he might wake up. So after 4 hours of playing dead and dumb, I finally spoke up. "Can I have a cup of strong black tea?" They took this as a sign of progress. I began to open up to them. One of the detectives left the room and didn't return for about 15 minutes. His partner asked why he was taking so long. He returned with a pale face and a submissive look. The younger detective realized that something had changed. "Miss Burns, we owe you an apology," said the senior detective. "It seems that the chief had one too many and got into a situation he shouldn't have been in." When they found him, he was sitting with a hangover in an empty truck near the border in Sumas, Washington. Heading for Canada, he was wearing a stolen orange jumpsuit. We now know from his own words that it was his fault. He said he couldn't explain anything because his mind was clouded. It must have been a hell of a bender. How long have you been hiding that he's just drunk? Does he often have periods where he loses the ability to think straight? "I think I need a cup of tea," I said. "Can anyone tell me where I can buy some tea? I need to think everything through and write it down before I go to a lawyer to file a civil suit against the police for unlawful detention." The two detectives' faces paled. I spoke with knowledge and authority. Now they realized that I wasn't very impressed by what had happened. Ask yourselves why the boss needed an alibi for the weekend that couldn't be refuted. Why would my significant other, his acknowledged mistress, if you believe what you've been telling me for the last 4 hours, want to have me arrested? I asked, looking straight at them. Perhaps if you look at them as closely as you're looking at me, you'll notice that they both seem to be defending themselves. Are you saying we've been set up? Asked the junior detective. No, I just wanted to know why they decided I needed an alibi with you until today. Now, please give me back my cell phone, I said. I'd like to get out of here and go to a restaurant for a cup of black tea, since you two refused to bring me one. We were almost at the front door when the concierge said, "Mr. Burns, a little over 2 hours ago, the alarm went off at the Pig and Whistle bar, and we've already sent police to investigate." It looks like whoever broke in had a key and knew the combination to the safe. Damn it, I said. There was more than 20,000 in cash in the safe at 11 o'clock last night. Both detectives looked at me in complete shock when I said, "Now I understand why I was called here." With that, I left the building and headed for my restaurant and bar. I needed to see what damage the burglars had done. I had walked about half a block when a young, handsome police officer offered me a ride. When I got into the passenger seat, he told me he had orders to take me to a certain location. In his presence, I called Margaret, my soon-to-be ex-wife. She answered on the first ring. I knew he had been ordered to record everything on video. "The detectives finally let me go and dropped all charges," I said. "From what I've been told, your lover Peter Reynolds is alive and well. I can imagine how relieved you must be. From what I've learned, I have a question. Were you stalking Peter to get revenge on Tammy for stealing him from you? The police are taking me to the Pig and Whistle bar because it was broken into today while I was at the police station. Could you and your longtime lover have planned this to ruin my reputation before my upcoming divorce?" I hung up and said, "Imagine that. She ended the call without even letting me answer. Why would she do that if she didn't want to answer my questions? I wonder what else she's hiding." I called my parents, and when my father answered, I said, "Dad, can you help me?" After my father agreed, I said, "Call Margaret and tell her you're going to pick up my things and the keys to my Ford pickup truck. Then, bring them to the Pig and Whistle. I'm on my way there with the police. All charges against me have been dropped, so I'm going to sue them for false accusation and slander. It looks like someone who knows the inner workings of the police department set me up on purpose." "What the hell is going on, Ray?" my father asked. "Oh, you didn't know?" I said. "The police arrested me because they suspect I killed my wife's lover, Peter Reynolds, the police chief. Hell, I didn't even know about their affair until the detectives revealed it when they were questioning me." I looked at the young cop's face and saw that it had turned white as a sheet. I knew he believed what he had heard. I smiled because no one knew what magic could happen from a few fingerprints on a game test, and agreeing to pay cash for the police chief's property tax. For some reason, the cop stopped on his way to my bar to make sure I got the biggest cup of tea with milk he could buy. During the trip to the police station, our church pastor and a minor member of our community came to provide me with an alibi. The detectives learned that I had been mentoring this child for several months as a member of the Big Brother organization. Parishioners had provided the money needed for the project I was working on. My young friend and I worked on restoring a car on Fridays and Saturdays. We kept it a secret because we wanted to surprise his single mother whose birthday was coming up. It was the first car she had bought as a single mother. For the police detective, it all ended well. They saw their future work go up in smoke because of the incompetence of the police department. The pastor brought a film crew with him. They had to explain everything. It was supposed to be on the 10 o'clock news and in the newspaper on Monday. When I arrived, I discovered that the back door had been used to enter. I told the officer that this indicated that the person knew how to bypass the security system. It must have been the work of someone on the inside. Only 2 managers have keys to the office, my wife and me. The police made a mess looking for fingerprints. I reminded them that my desk was occupied when they registered me and took my photo. They treated me with the utmost respect. They were almost finished when I asked them if they knew a locksmith who could come on Sunday afternoon to pick the locks. Fortunately, they did, and I called him. It was expensive, but everyone agreed that it was the best way to ensure security. I pointed out that a bag containing money intended for the night deposit was missing from the bank. With their permission, I took out my bank book and printed a copy. It showed that I had deposited 10 checks. "Does that matter?" I asked. "Only if we find them where they shouldn't be," he replied. We didn't know that later that week, those 10 checks would be found in a locked drawer in the police chief's office at the station. The cash was never found. Mom and Dad arrived just as the locksmith walked in. He changed 5 locks and gave me the 4 copies I needed. When he left, we sat down and talked over a drink at the bar. They were shocked to learn how I had found out about my wife's infidelity that day. My father decided to call Margaret's father and tell him everything. That's when I found out that this wasn't the first time Peter Reynolds had interfered in my marriage. This time, it was over. My mother allowed me to stay with them until I sorted everything out. As soon as my children found out that I had been released, they called me. I explained to each of them what I had learned at the police station and told them that I would be staying with my grandparents for the time being. They were shocked to learn that their mother had been cheating on them for so long. When my parents left, I locked the door and sat down in my pride and joy. which I had owned for over 18 years. It was still in perfect condition, and I often drove it to car shows and meetings. Once I was alone, I sent Tammy a message. "You can talk now." A few seconds later, my cell phone rang. "Raymond, are you okay?" Tammy asked. "I'm fine," I replied. "It's been a pretty stressful day finding out that my wife and your husband have been cheating on me. How are you dealing with it? I guess you found out on Friday night." "It was shocking," she replied. "Maybe we should meet up and talk about it." "I was just about to go to Cracker Barrel for a bite to eat," I said. You can join me if you want." "On the way," Tammy said. "I'll wait for you in the lobby." When I arrived, she was already there. We must have looked like an odd couple, her in jeans and me in a suit for church. We asked the hostess to show us a place where we could talk privately. Fortunately, there weren't many people there at that time of day. After ordering what we wanted, we began to talk quietly. "I was in complete shock when detectives came to my work on Friday evening and told me what they had found," says Tammy. "Then I remembered that you had asked for 4 weeks. I told the police that deep down I didn't believe he was dead," says Tammy. "Then they asked me if I knew about Peter's affair." "What affair?" I replied. Then they told me how they knew. "I pretended to be as shocked as you are," I said. "I had no idea I was going to be arrested so publicly. I left the detectives with a bunch of questions that will require further investigation." "The best part is that your wife had to testify against both of them," said Tammy. "That saved us a lot of trouble." "Be prepared for the detectives to ask you if your husband has a drinking problem," I said. "I was under the impression that he did." "That's easy to deal with," Tammy said. "I'll just say that I believe he does, but Peter is still in denial." "I'm going to see Dale Britton tomorrow to see if he'll represent me," I said. "I'm going to make the situation worse by filing a civil suit against the city police department, your husband, and, of course, your divorce from your wife. I'll have my lawyer issue an official statement," she said, "that as of this moment, I am no longer responsible for his debts." "Tammy," I said, "there's one more thing you should know. During our senior year of high school, when Margaret and I were dating, we broke up because your husband moved in with Margaret behind my back. He left her for you, just like she left me. I wondered if Margaret had set Peter up to get back at him." This revelation about our history explained a lot to her. I realized that Margaret had a new enemy for life. "When did you and Margaret get back together?" she asked. "About 8 months after your wedding announcement," I replied, "which was reported in the local newspaper." Margaret Burns sat there trying to understand how everything could have gone so wrong so quickly. It was a complete shock to her when the police arrested her husband as they were preparing for their usual Sunday dinner. The coldness in Ray's voice when he said, "What are you accusing me of, Margaret?" said it all. A flood of questions immediately came to mind. Unfortunately, she couldn't answer any of them because she had to keep her behavior a secret. Now both sides of their family knew about her affair. Her 3 children were crying upstairs. The way Ray found out must have been a real disaster for him. But here's what was unclear. If Peter Reynolds was alive, why hadn't he contacted her? Each of their children came to tell her separately that they had spoken to their father after his parents had come to collect his personal belongings. That was when she learned that her husband had told them he had been arrested because he had been accused of murdering his wife's lover before he was found alive. Ray explained that someone had played a very serious joke on him, taken to the extreme. When asked why, he explained, "Someone wanted your mother's long-standing relationship with her lover to become public knowledge. I think it was someone he helped put in prison. I hope the state investigates this whole situation because right now it seems like the reputation of the Cape Town police is being called into question." Ray, indirectly, directly, and openly accused them of being behind it all because of their work. His arrest, the break-in at their restaurant, and the destruction of 2 marriages began to look like one big plan. Margaret didn't know that the children had held a family meeting in one of the bedrooms and decided together that after the divorce they would live with their father. Margaret already regretted getting involved with Peter after he dumped her. She knew he loved people to the extreme. 2 years later, at their father's annual company picnic, Ray and she spoke to each other again. It was only a few weeks after the picnic that she learned from friends how much she had hurt him. She didn't realize that he was madly in love with her. At the time, he was just a friend to her. Many said that it changed him forever, and they were right. The Raymond she met that day was a stranger to her. He was a reserved person and didn't say much. There was a certain aloofness and coldness about him that she hadn't noticed before. Although he walked with his head held high, he walked alone. On that first day, they exchanged only a few words, and he refused to talk about his life. His former openness was gone. Later, her parents learned that he hadn't dated anyone since she had. A few months later, a car accident on Highway 55 changed everything. She had a blowout at high speed, lost control, and rolled over several times. The car caught fire. Ray, who was driving in the opposite direction, pulled over to the side of the road. Fighting his way through the smoke, he reached the front seat, unbuckled her seatbelt, and pulled her out. Until she was out of danger, he didn't even recognize her. He held her until the paramedics arrived, then called her parents to tell them what had happened. She was semi-conscious, but she heard him say that he still loved her and told her to hang on. It took her over a week to recover, and when he wasn't working, he was by her side. Her idea of the love she had been searching for changed, and she began to see Ray in a different light. 8 months later, she became his fiancée. Over time, she grew to love him, but she was never as in love with him as he was with her. Everything was fine until Peter Reynolds came into her life looking better than ever. Over time, he won her heart, and they became lovers. No man had ever made her feel the passion and emotion that Peter did. Peter gave her the spark and thrill of young love for the first time. She felt like a girl in love again. They both felt an instant attraction as soon as he sat down. Soon, they couldn't resist the desire they felt for each other. Now, both families were torn apart. Ray, her husband, was suffering terribly, and unfortunately, she knew better than anyone that he didn't deserve it. Raymond had been a good husband and provider throughout their marriage. She was still lost in her thoughts when her eldest son entered the room. "Mom, the three of us were talking upstairs," Jean said firmly. "We decided that since I'm the oldest, I should tell you that after the divorce, we're going to live with Dad. That way, you can have the life you seem to want with Mr. Reynolds." Margaret simply burst into tears. Her own behavior had cost her everything, and she had only herself to blame. Her eldest daughter, a miniature version of Margaret herself, had expressed it perfectly, pointing out what her mother's behavior had been saying all along. "I was at the Pig and Whistle early in the morning. I had to let the staff in. Those who had arrived early were watching the morning news. Everyone was discussing the information that had just become available. This prompted me to announce that the Pig and Whistle would be open no matter what. I gave the restaurant manager new keys and a new code for the safe. I gave her the bar manager's kit and asked her to give him the code for the safe. She was surprised that I didn't suspect the staff. She took fingerprints from one of the employees and ordered a thorough cleaning of the back room and my office. It was a normal start to the day. While I was waiting for breakfast, I got the impression that many people were there out of curiosity. After that, I went to work as usual. My colleagues were very supportive of me and what I had been through. I called Dale Britton's office and arranged a meeting for 1 p.m. I spent the morning answering phone calls and doing odd jobs. As soon as I walked into his office, I knew he would take on the case. Dale had never liked the new police chief who had come in after he left. Dale considered Peter Reynolds to be an arrogant, self-absorbed jerk who had all the skills necessary for the job, but was always looking for a way to advance his career. As soon as Margaret arrived at the office, 2 detectives came in to talk to her. They wanted to know if her husband was going to press charges. She said, "He really has no choice. You ruined his reputation by attacking him with your fists. You exposed my affair with Peter and destroyed his life as he knew it. You seem completely unaware of what Peter did after he left work on Friday. If this was a setup, as my husband believes, then so be it," Margaret said. "You need to find out who did this and why. I'm asking you, where did you find Peter?" "In the back of a truck near the border in a town in Washington state," replied the senior detective. "We asked if Peter was drunk or unconscious. Comparing him to my husband, I would say he probably drinks too much, but I've never seen him drunk," Margaret explained. "You'll have to ask his wife that question." At lunchtime, the news reported that the mayor had asked state officials to come and investigate the situation. 6 days later, that Sunday after the service, the pastor called a single mother and handed her the keys to her car. It wasn't new, but now it was in perfect condition and fully insured. I watched as he told her how her 10-year-old son and I had worked together at his house to get the car into such good shape. Her emotional reaction and tears of pure joy couldn't help but move me. My children saw my Ford truck as soon as they arrived and joined me to sit next to me during the service. I was surprised that Margaret didn't show up. It was the first service she had missed in several months. Then I realized she couldn't bear the stares and whispers behind her back. My 3 children had driven 2 miles to get here. I couldn't help but be proud of them. My 2 daughters held my hand proudly, and the single mother thanked me over and over for the knowledge and time I had given her son. Over the past few months, I've seen my son change, she says. Suddenly, he started fixing things around the house, even though I could have bought everything we needed. I knew Brother Burns was his mentor, but I didn't realize how much until the neighbors started paying him for his help whenever they could. Instead of keeping the money for himself, he put it in our piggy bank. For the first time in many years, we have no bills or debts except for a small mortgage on our house. I don't think Brother Burns knows how much he has improved our lives. My son finally bought us a computer and uses it to repair small appliances. After that, she came over to me, gave me a big hug, and thanked me again. As soon as she was done, my father and I exchanged keys, and I was able to take the kids out to lunch and spend some time alone with them. I asked Agnes to let their mother know what we were doing so she wouldn't worry. The last weeks of Peter and Margaret's lives were dissected as if under a microscope. One of the questions they were trying to answer was how 9 checks from the Pig and Whistle bank deposit ended up in a locked drawer to which only Peter had the key. Another question was where the money had come from to pay the property tax they had planned to pay. They discovered that the property tax had been updated, and on Wednesday of that week the tax for that year had been paid. It was paid in cash one day after Peter's return. City officials Peter Reynolds and Margaret Burns received a subpoena on Friday. Dale Britton acted quickly and efficiently. He arranged for the lawsuit against the city to be served on the mayor himself. Surprisingly, on the same day, an envelope containing a set of keys was delivered to the mayor's office. 2 detectives soon discovered that they were the keys to the police station and a copy of the old master key to the Pig and Whistle bar. Now they were sure it was the work of someone in the police force, because Margaret's desk was behind Peter's office door and visible to everyone in the large open space. Of course, they had to hand over their find to the authorities who were now investigating. It was obvious that anyone could have copied the keys, as Margaret never locked her handbag and it always lay next to her on the table. If she had left to run some errands, someone could easily have taken the keys without attracting attention. During lunch at Yummy's restaurant, I learned for the first time that my children wanted to live with me. I learned that their mother had had a hard time coming to terms with the end of our marriage. I explained that in life, we too often don't think about the consequences of our actions until we cause harm. A good example is the many people who are serving time for foolish things because they didn't stop and think about the opportunity that was available to them. "Dad," said Jean, "was cheating the only reason you divorced Mom?" "No," I replied. "Cheating is only part of the physical evidence. To get to that point, your mother had to emotionally, mentally, and spiritually walk away from the family before she committed that act." Jesus explained the same thing when he said, "I will never leave you." We lose faith and drift away from him. Your mother had to distance herself from us and our views on family life in order to start her affair. That act was the final blow to our marriage because it caused us all to lose our ability to trust her. "It's not as simple as it seems," Wade said quietly. "Her own looks deceived her and destroyed her. Because of one of them, we all have to accept this outcome." I sat there stunned. My son had put it all together and explained it better than I ever could have. I wondered where he got such wisdom. "She willingly went from one man to another," Agnes said. "She knew what she was doing. That's why I'll never forgive her." To keep the conversation going, I asked them what they would like to see in our new home. This led to an open and honest discussion. When I dropped them off at the curb in front of my former home, I saw Margaret looking out the window. I didn't pay any attention to her. As soon as the children were inside, I drove to my father's house to prepare dinner for Tammy. Later, I learned that Margaret had spent the entire evening in her bedroom crying. Tammy saw my old 1940 Ford for the first time when I picked her up. We drove 25 minutes to a pizza place in Marble Hills. We were dressed casually. "Peter's been on edge since he got back from his surprise trip," Tammy said. "It didn't help that he had to find a new place to live. I asked him to pick me up as soon as he got off the plane." "Did they ask you about his drinking?" "I gave them several hints about where he likes to hang out," Tammy said. "I mentioned the name of the place you asked for. Why was that so important?" "That place is known as a front for high-end escort services," I replied. "The police know he's a client there." Tammy laughed because she found it amusing, and when she calmed down, she said, I want to see Margaret's face when she finds out. Bravo, Ray. Well done. Everything possible is being done to get him out of the police force and completely destroy his reputation, I said. They won't be able to charge him with anything, but they'll say the evidence forced him to resign without a recommendation. His 20-year career in the police force is his whole life, Tammy said. It will be destroyed because he couldn't control himself. I like that you're not angry and you're not giving them a chance. Then I told her about the day I spent with the kids and gave her a general idea of what we had discussed. Tammy cried while I was talking. You made me look at this whole mess from a perspective I never could have imagined, she said. Why haven't I met people who think this way before? That's because our lives have made us who we are, I replied. Before that, we probably didn't have enough life experience to understand it. After thinking about that, she moved closer to me and said, I'd like to get to know you better. The pizzeria made a big impression on Tammy. She met my old friend and his wife. Scott and Trish Tate were having dinner with their little daughter, who was just under 5 years old. It was obvious that she would soon have a little brother or sister. I found it funny that she didn't know who he was. They had arrived before us and invited us to join them. Tammy and Trish seemed to hit it off right away. Scott and I talked about all the public confusion and my plans for the future. Scott said that if I needed money to buy out my soon-to-be ex-wife's share of the Pig and Whistle, I should let him know. He'd be happy to help me out. I explained to both of them who Tammy was, and they seemed to take it in stride. I learned from him that after Peter was fired, the captain would be promoted instead of looking for a replacement on the street. Scott thought that was what the city should have done from the beginning. If they had done so, none of what was happening now would have happened. When Tammy heard this, a smile appeared on her face that I would describe as a $1,000,000 smile. The huge pizza was amazing. We all overeat, finishing the pizza and drinking 2 mugs of beer. Trish suggested we get together the following Saturday night for a casual dinner and dancing at Baitia on Bay Street. Tammy said it was a date. Trish, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask, Tammy said. How did you meet Scott? Scott was working as a state investigator, Trish explained. On my 29th birthday, I tried to arrest him. We ended up handcuffed together, and 11 months later we were married. Ray will tell you the whole story later. Tammy, Trish's parents are old friends of mine. We met because we're both members of the Legion, I explained. That's how I met Scott. How are Helen and John? They're busy with their grandchildren, Trish replied with a smile. Mom can't be truly happy unless they're running around after her. Upon learning that Tammy was a registered nurse, the ladies exchanged phone numbers. Scott and Trish paid the bill, and we began to get ready for the night. As we walked to her house, I couldn't help but stop and listen to the rest of their story. 2 weeks later, Peter Reynolds and Margaret were sitting at Dunkin' Donuts on Sunday morning, drinking coffee and trying to figure out who wanted him dead. Starting with the tip that led him to a hole in the wall, to showing up naked in the back of a truck, robbing the Pig and Whistle bar, paying taxes on a used property, finding stolen checks in a locked drawer, and now claims that he was a client of an expensive escort service. He found himself in a situation where he was being forced to leave. The state police and the detectives working with them now believe that the robbery of the Pig and Whistle bar had provided the money to pay for the lawyer. Margaret finally admitted that the piece of paper with the code to the safe had been found at the bottom of the box where she kept her jewelry. Hearing this, the detectives concluded that Peter could have easily found it when he was in her bedroom. Everyone they worked with now believed that he had deliberately used Margaret to hide his harmful habits. It had gotten to the point where he wasn't even drinking alcohol. It was believed that he had been on a binge during the weekend when he disappeared. All of this became public knowledge. Peter suggested that Margaret's husband might be behind it all. The detectives listened to the interrogation recordings to show his facial expression when he learned about the affair. They had audio recordings of Ray's conversation with Margaret, or her conversation with her husband, and her phone call to her parents. Everything they recorded indicated that he did not know about their relationship. The deciding factor was that the pastor provided him with an ironclad alibi for that weekend. Raymond Burns brilliantly commented on what Margaret and they themselves had said. So well, in fact, that there was not a shred of truth left in his words. His questions led the detectives in completely the wrong direction. The circumstantial evidence came together to form a picture that naturally led to a single conspiracy. His lawsuit would have cost the department a pretty penny. Raymond Burns was considered untouchable, innocent, just caught up in the case. Whoever is behind this, Margaret said, knows the police well enough to manipulate the evidence and point it straight at you. The question is, who in the department did you piss off? Your husband was careful, Peter said. Even if he needs something from home, he asks a lawyer for help. That shows he's a smart man and quite capable of doing so. The problem is that a case like this requires a team. At least 3 to put you in the truck, Margaret said. Someone in the department stole my keys and put them back. The key to your drawer could have been copied on the day you disappeared. The problem is, where did they get the combination to the safe with my handwriting? After all, Ray isn't evil enough to organize all this. The state even talked to the property owner who said he was glad Peter kept his word, Peter said. My house will be waiting for me when I get out. You're in a situation where everyone is against you, Margaret said. It looks like you're going to have to resign because you've already been suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. It doesn't help that the detectives believe you set them up and got them to arrest my soon-to-be ex-husband. Is there anything in your past that could give more weight to the circumstantial evidence? The only thing I can say in my defense is that Tammy didn't try to turn our children against me, Peter says. They both think I'm a little overbearing because of what I did. They refuse to talk to me about their mother because, as they say, I lost the right to know when I first cheated on her. At least you still have a relationship with your children, Margaret said. Jean Sr. said, we never abandoned you, Mom. You abandoned us the moment your eyes turned to your lover. That's why we were so hurt. We didn't notice until it was too late to talk to you. Now they are looking for a house together with their father and preparing to move. Peter sat in thought, gradually realizing that not only had they ruined their relationships with their families, but now, as a couple, they had nothing left but the bonds they had imposed on themselves. Damn it, they didn't even love each other. I asked my lawyer to transfer my car to my father through a third party. I traded in my electric car for a used Ford Explorer, getting the difference in price. This afternoon, Tammy, the 3 kids, and I went house hunting. Tammy and I were still getting to know each other. She just came along to be an extra pair of eyes. Margaret and I, thanks to our lawyers, came to an agreement. She got the house and I got the business. The transfer of ownership has already been finalized and registered. The city manager's lawyers reviewed my application and asked me to wait until the state investigation was complete. Dale Britton made it clear that we considered this a ploy to buy time. We found a great house with 5 acres of land. It had 4 bedrooms, all on the second floor, with a huge master bedroom and double walk-in closet. There was a 4-car garage with an open floor plan on the first floor. The house didn't have a basement, but the living room could be partitioned off to make it a safe room during tornadoes. Wayne liked the extra building that could be converted into a hardware store. We all agreed that the house needed to be repainted and the floors on the first floor needed to be repaired. I wanted to put laminate flooring throughout the first floor because it is easy to maintain. The rest of the house seemed modern and up-to-date to Tammy. I said I wanted to replace the light fixtures on the second floor with recessed lighting and have them built into the ceiling like most of the light fixtures on the first floor. The price seemed high, so I offered a much lower one. Tammy called her children, and we all met at Red Lobster for dinner. Tammy and I were surprised that the children knew each other, even though their children were a couple of years older and in high school. That evening, when I drove the children to their mother, Tammy was with me. The next day, I learned from the children that their mother had flown into a rage when she saw us together. Margaret angrily demanded answers to questions they didn't know because they had just met her. She became very angry when Wade told her that what their father was doing was no longer any of their business because she had decided to leave him for Mr. Reynolds. A month later, on Tuesday morning just after 9, Peter Reynolds took one last look around his office at the police station. The state investigation had found that, although there was no evidence of his guilt, everything pointed to him. The fact that he was drunk in the place where he was found made his conviction impossible. The mayor and the police captain took his badge and gun. He was given a choice, resign or be fired. Either way, he would not receive a recommendation as the evidence showed. He decided to resign immediately so as not to shift the blame to Margaret Burns. The person who brought the case against him did so masterfully. His career was ruined because he allowed himself to be distracted by someone else. Margaret watched as Peter left the police station a broken man. No one said goodbye or wished him luck. Everyone was glad to be rid of him. There had been too many dramatic events in the last couple of months because of his questionable behavior. Peter was forced to leave town, and he couldn't find a job here. The journalist's incessant questions were all about it. Margaret felt like she was losing the only friend she had left in the world. Most of the people she and her husband had been in regular contact with weren't talking to her. Even her children were busy packing, getting ready to move into their father's new house. The house she had considered too small was now too big for her alone. She was saddened by the realization of how unimportant it had become to her. Although her relationship with her children was gradually improving, she knew that the trust and love they had once felt for her had changed forever. Peter and she searched, but never found out anything about Tammy and Ray's relationship. All they could prove was that they had been seeing each other. And it was only after that terrible weekend that everyone's world came crashing down. Raymond acted as usual, keeping everything to himself and refusing to talk about anything except the children. He and the children spent the weekend choosing furniture for their bedrooms. From what she could see of the new house he had bought, it was bigger than their house and had more land. On Saturday, he asked permission to remove all his equipment from the store and asked her not to be there when he did so. As his lawyer had said, she was his past, and he wanted to leave her there forever. Margaret was just leaving the police station when she saw Tammy standing there, looking at her happily. The 12 o'clock news reported that her ex-husband was retiring soon. Peter went broke, you see. It was clearly stated in the contract because my father is a lawyer and he drafted it himself, Tammy said. If either of us cheated, we lost everything we put into the marriage except the original value of my trust fund. It's sad because he can't even afford a whore like you. Do you know who killed him? Margaret asked. Yes, that's right, said Tammy, smiling broadly. They say all dogs return to their vomit. Peter did, and it killed him. Margaret realized what Tammy meant and lost her temper. She lunged at her with pure hatred, intent on killing the bitch. Tammy was ready and fought back. The servants rushed in and pulled them apart. Both women had bruises under their eyes that were difficult to hide with makeup. They pulled them apart and advised Tammy to leave so that both women could calm down. My daughter Tammy called me and told me what had happened. Her mother took the rest of the week off work to help me clean the house I was planning to move into tomorrow, as the contractors were finishing up today. I had taken out a 10-year mortgage at 3.5%, thanks to a large down payment from my company's undistributed profits. I spent the whole night applying ice packs to reduce the swelling. Tamara thought it was funny that two middle-aged women were acting like immature children over a man. Ray, she asked while her mother was showering, are you feeling any better? I think your mom and I are helping each other, I replied. Ease the pain. We're still in the friendship stage, but we're both interested in seeing where this goes, but we're not pressuring each other. Mom is grateful to you for helping her get through this, Tamara said. She said you helped her realize that her marriage was over before the affair even started. I'm still trying to figure out how that's possible. To have an affair, a person has to emotionally distance themselves from their partner, I said. Instead of working on their relationship, they had already decided they wanted someone new. The affair started because they decided their marriage was dead. We were still discussing this issue when Tammy sat down next to me and said, I knew there was a problem, Tamara, even before we moved here. I thought moving would give us a fresh start. I was wrong. It takes two to make a relationship work, and both have to be fully committed. I was committed, but your father wasn't. Ray could have said the same thing about Margaret. The moment your partner stops doing that, your relationship is in jeopardy. Mom, Ray, I have a boyfriend I'm in a serious relationship with, she said. Do you think I should talk to him about it? We both said yes. 3 weeks later, Judge MacDonald banged his gavel, ending Margaret and my marriage. I was granted primary custody of our 3 children in accordance with their wishes. Margaret was granted unlimited visitation rights. The mayor, considering Margaret's connection to Peter, placed her on probation for 1 year. The terms we agreed to were approved by him. Margaret and I went outside and sat on a bench because we needed some air. I lost myself when Peter came back into my life, Margaret said. I want you to know that. I realize now that, like him, I had unresolved issues that I had forgotten about. Don't blame yourself for any of this. It's all Peter's doing, and mine. Thank you for saying that, I replied. That answers a lot of questions. I'm offering you a civil relationship and nothing more. I won't even call you a friend. Outside of our children's lives, we'll stay out of each other's way because it's going to take me a long time to forgive you. That's more than I expected, she said. Our pastor advised me to find a new church because many people don't want to forget what happened. So I started looking. As for our children, whenever we agree on something, I ask them to check with you so that it doesn't conflict with your plans. When she got up and left, I struggled not to say, wait, let's try again, even though I knew I didn't love her anymore. It took me a few minutes to realize that I needed time to break away from the familiar. Fortunately, the relationship Tammy and I had built allowed us to leave our shared past behind. Margaret will never know that the greatest gift she ever gave me was in those final moments. With her words, she gave me the freedom to move forward. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next video.